This is the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Good morning and welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go on the world's greatest radio. You are now in touch with the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. And this is radio the way it should be heard. I want to start off by saying thank you to some of our loyal listeners, and some of our loyal listeners are also some of our continuing contributors, so we want to thank you for that. BW Gifts, Bartholomew down in Houston, Texas, thank you so much. LaShawna King, Eric Williams, Helen Nance, Don Mitchner, Terrence Morgan, Jane Lance, and Tony Greer. We thank you. We thank you so much for your donations. We thank you also for listening and whatever things that you'd like to say on your emails or Gmails. We thank you, all of it. All righty. With that being said, on radio the way it should be heard, the title of today's program that Mr. Fuller and I will discuss, but mostly Mr. Fuller, is now that some of you have purchased the code book, have you read the code book? That is important to read and to understand, and you do that by asking questions. And thank you, sir. Oh, okay. And that's how you learn. And Mr. Fuller always says the answer to any problems is to ask questions. Ask questions and get answers, and don't help the person that you're asking the question to. Don't help them with that. With that being said, first of all, let's say, good morning, Mr. Fuller, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning. You
are still learning. Mr. Fuller, every week, and even sometimes during the broadcast, our broadcast here, you say this so often. You repeat it, and it just simply says, if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Now, I remember myself, when I first read that, I just read it. But one day, as I was reading it, I began to understand what you were saying. If you do not understand, as a matter of fact, we did a program entitled If You Do Not Understand. And I bring that up because of the Gmails that I receive constantly. And more often than not, it is indicative that if a person has the book, they're not reading the book. They're not understanding the code. Could you, before we get started, give a little talk about what it means if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works? Can you expound on that a little bit? And listeners, I want you to pay close attention to what Mr. Fuller is saying, if you don't understand. Mr. Fuller, go ahead, please.
Well, someone asked me some years ago, they said, Fuller, you made this statement about if you don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. And the person said, well, I have a question about that. And the question was directed to me. He said, it was a person, a male person, black person. And he said, does that mean that if I don't understand how to, white supremacy, I wouldn't understand how to drive a car? I said, within the greater scheme of things, the answer is not driving the car, but what you're driving the car for. And where did you get the car from? And why are you in a car? And where are you going in the car, and where do you get there? See, that's what I mean by, taking the the greater view, the world view. And that's what, see, you can say, what is understanding? I mean, and where does it cut off? What's the cutoff point in understanding anything? Is there a cutoff point? And exactly where it is. Say, if I'm going to understand something about the universe, where's the cutoff point when it comes to understanding the universe that we're in? How many trillions of stars are there? See what I mean? Now, that requires knowledge. And knowledge comes before understanding, because you have to understand what it is you know. But also understanding comes before knowledge, because you have to understand that you have to get knowledge. All right? So where does knowledge begin and understanding begin, and where are the cutoff points? So it's all interrelated. See, it's a matter of really understanding what we mean by understanding. All right? Or what do we mean by knowledge? That's why I always say that I'm still learning, because I'm still learning what understanding is. And I'm still learning what knowledge is. When do you, like we say, we graduate from high school, then we go into college, and then we get postgraduate courses and whatnot from college, and then we get out into life, and we use a cliche saying, I mean, that everybody just takes for granted. We say, now, I'm no longer in school. Well, the code view is you're always in school.
Yes.
As long as you're learning anything. If you learn something today that you didn't know before, if you learn where the next bus stop is going to be, I mean, because they changed the routes today. I mean, you got to catch the bus, and somebody says, well, you can't catch the bus on this corner. You have to catch it down on the other corner now, because they're doing construction on this corner.
Yes.
All right? So you learn something that you didn't know. And you say, well, yeah, but that don't have nothing to do with school. The whole universe is a school. That's why they call places that you go, of what they call higher learning, universities. Because you're supposed to be learning about the entire universe that you're in. It never stops.
Okay.
I mean, even when you're getting ready to die, you've seen people die, heard of people dying, and probably witnessed people dying and whatnot. I mean, but when you die, you are learning. You're learning about your own death, which you've never experienced before, as far as you can remember.
Yes.
All right? So, when we all are going to die, and when we do, we will be learning something that we never knew before, and that is what death is really like for us as an individual. Not standing by the bedside of somebody else who's dying, and you're not dying. Okay. So you're learning then. So right up to the day that you die, you're learning something that you didn't know before. And that's the root of that expression. If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
Will only confuse
and
you.
What it really means for the victim of racism is you don't really understand racism and what it is and how it works until it's over. All right? Because in the process of trying to get rid of it, you are learning.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And it's only when racism no longer exists that you can have a complete understanding of white supremacy.
All righty.
And that should be our objective, having a complete understanding by getting rid of it.
Yes, sir. Okay, here are the numbers and information that you need to get in contact with the show. 1-877-932-9766 is the number you can call. You can also Gmail me, but I probably will not read it today because we are just full of those. But anyway, it's the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. You can also watch the live broadcast of the compensatory concept. All you have to do is go to YouTube and type in the word Talktainment, hit the space bar and type in the word radio, scroll down to Talktainment #2 live on YouTube, and watch the live broadcast. Facebook.com/Talktainment is another way to get it, but we encourage you to also do this. Go to Talktainment.com and hit the podcast, and you can and talktainment.com radio and hit the podcast, radio.com, okay, and hit that button, and then you can do the podcast. I'll get that straight on the next break. But that's the ways that you can get that or hear the program in its entirety and on the replay. In fact, we encourage you to do that. Okay, 1-877-932-9766. Okay, keep that in mind about the code. Have you read or studied the code since you've got the book? That's going to be our program focus today. Have you read the code book? Okay, this email comes from David, and he says this, Mr. Fuller, and that's another thing. We're getting a lot of questions, which is good, but it does take up a lot of time, and we want to give Mr. Fuller ample opportunity to answer your questions. But if we do that, and as we have been doing it, that means we get further and further behind. Just keep that in mind. I will get to your Gmails, but just keep that in mind. Some people ask 5 and 6 questions, and you know what that does. Anyway, David says this: greetings, Mr. Fuller. I have 2 questions. First one, can any non-white person be and function as a white supremacist in the system of white supremacy?
No. You can't be a prisoner and a warden at the same time. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. You're either a prisoner of war or you're not. And regardless of what your status is in the prison, if you're a prisoner, that's your status. Even if you're given special privileges, like you no longer have to work in the workshop, and you work in the library. Mm-hmm. All right, you're not working as hard now. All right, or you're working in the warden's office as a typist, or a computer operator, maybe, or something like that. But you're a prisoner. You're not the warden. And they'll say, well, hey, but you have the luxury of working in the warden's office right alongside the warden. You're a trustee, and and you get better food when it comes to you go down when the warden eats. I mean, you go down with him sometimes, and I mean because he's talking about some administrative work or something like that, and so you might get better food because they set aside better food for the warden. So you get a little better food. If it's the same as the slave in the plantation, they had what they call the house slave and the field slave. Well, the house slave, naturally being in the house, and that wind is whipping outside and the snow is falling and whatnot, and the field slave is down there in that little shack, that little one-room shack, and there's no heat there, and he's practically freezing to death. But the house slave is putting the logs on the fire in the big house. And they got a huge fireplace there, and since he tends the fireplace and puts logs in the fireplace and starts the fire and keeps the house warm and sees to it that the whole house is warm, he's always warm. And even though that winter wind out there, I mean, it's 0 weather out there, but he's not feeling it. Why? Because he's right close to the best fire on the entire plantation, the best warming mechanisms. All right, but he's still what? A slave.
He's still a slave, yes, sir.
All right.
Okay. All right, and then the second question is this. He says, so many people in my experience tell me that the system of justice that we need resembles a socialist communist where everyone gets what they need. Some also call this utopia, the perfect world, which apparently can exist because, quote, people are innately evil, end of quote. I don't believe this. I think people are good at heart, but it's the system of injustice with cognitive dissonance overtones that make people think this way. What do you say to people, Mr. Fuller, who don't believe that we can have a utopian system of justice?
Well, I dispense with the word utopia because I don't really know what that means. But I always, throughout the code, I mentioned the term justice, which means guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most the most constructive help in what area of activity he or she needs that constructive help. And I think that can be done. That's a mechanical operation. It's just a matter of putting the buttons in place and pushing the buttons at the time and place that they need to be pushed. We do it in mathematics. We do it, buildings go up, highways are built, vessels that carry people go into outer space. Also, containers that carry people can go below the ocean and study things and bring things up from the bottom of the ocean and all like that. So it's a lot of things that can be done, and they can be done without mistreating anybody. I mean, you don't have to mistreat people. The white supremacists believe in order to get anything done, you got to mistreat somebody. That's their philosophy.
Yes, sir.
All right? And you got to deny people help who need constructive help. And so the concept of justice says, no, that's not true. If you really are serious about practicing justice, it can be done. All right? And I believe that it can be done. Now, there are a lot of people who say, no, justice cannot be actually produced. We can talk about it, we can discuss it, but it can't be done. Some years ago, a person talked to me, and he said, Fuller, you might as well give up. He said, the race problem cannot be solved. It can only be discussed. So I thought about that, because that's a flat statement. That's an evaluation. So I think it was a school teacher or ex-school teacher that said that to me. And so I thought about it like I'm required to think about everything that somebody says to me about race. So I thought about it, and I said, well, that's not logical, because it's not logical from this viewpoint. If the race problem cannot be solved, absolutely cannot be solved, it can only be discussed, then there's no point in discussing it. It's not logical to even talk about it. Just throw up both hands and say it's a done deal forever. I mean, why talk about it? Why have meetings? Why have organizations, with people wringing their hands and standing up and trying to shout each other down and all like that? Why go through all that if it can't be done? Why bother? Why not just say it's a done deal? It's in stone. It's written in steel, and just go along with it, and just grin and bear it. Just keep grinning and shuffle along and bear it. Put up with it, because it can't be. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, I looked at history, and I've looked at all the different things that people said couldn't be done. Can't go to the moon. There's no such thing as a person being able to fly. I don't care what kind of contraption they make. That thing will fall down out of the sky. You can't go nowhere trying to fly. Birds fly. Bees fly. But if people were meant to fly, they would have been born with wings. And people used to draw pictures of people with wings. But when they actually tried to put wings on people, like, sometimes they put things on capes and whatnot on people's backs and try to jump from a high place, and it didn't work out. But somebody kept at it. Some of the first people who tried to fly, everybody laughed at them. And if you look at history, if there's anything to it, just about everybody who tried to do anything that people assumed could not be done, everybody laughed. Mm-hmm. Everybody said they were crazy.
Yes.
That's a lunatic. He's not going to be able to do that. People have never done that. See, because that's usually the criteria. People say it's never been done. Mm-hmm. So evidently, if it's never been done, it can't be done. So they say the same thing about the production and the realization of justice. Some people say it's impossible to have justice. And so I have decided that, going by the record of impossibilities, maybe it can be done, and maybe I ought to try it, and maybe even if it can't be done, I ought to try it. All right? Why? Because it's an excellent idea to shoot for, and you're not wasting your time when you're trying to do something that you should try to do anyway. fill a vacuum that needs to be filled.
All righty. TalkTameItRadio.com is a 24/7, no-charge, worldwide broadcasting facility with hosts delivering on various topics such as news and lifestyle, sports, law, health, wellness, religion, and politics. And here's two I'd like to share with you. This one is called This is Libby, and she gives you the best information on holistic living, vitamins, skincare, thought, even speech, and even your actions. It's excellent. And off air, she throws excellent parties where people come in from all walks of life, sit down, eat, conversate. It's just wonderful. It's all wholesome. So check that out. This is Libby. And also All in the Family with S. Yolanda Robinson, two great programs that we have here at Talktainment Radio. And all you have to do is go to the TalkTainmentRadio.com homepage, click on programs for the scheduled times. Talktainment Radio, that's radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby, and I am the co-host of The Compensatory Concept. And we have as our guest Neely Fuller Jr. and getting ready to say on-screen topic, but our topic today is, have you read the code book, particularly since you have purchased it? Have you read it? That's very important, and Mr. Fuller has been discussing that. 1-877-932-9766 is the number that you can call. Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And now you can also go to the YouTube channel and watch the live broadcast. Type in the word Talktainment, hit the space bar, and type in the word radio and scroll down to Talktainment number 2 live on YouTube, where you can watch the broadcast. And Facebook.com/Talktainment. You can view it that way. But we would like for you to go to TalkTainmentRadio.com, our homepage, and you can hit, what is that I'm supposed to hit? What is that I'm supposed to, that they can hear the podcast via Talktainment? What is that called? Talktainment Radio? Okay, TalkTainmentRadio.com, hit program. Okay, program. That's the way that we would prefer that you hit that. I'm going to have that written out so I can give it the proper introduction. Okay, going to the Gmails. This is from Miss Washington. Thank you, Miss Washington, for that. She says, good morning, Mr. Fuller. I have 3 questions for you. Okay. She says, number 1, will racism, white supremacy end if black people do nothing but wait for others to die out? Will having children with white people help to solve racism, white supremacy? And lastly, can racism, white supremacy be taken over with Asian or Latin supremacy?
Well, in answer to, they said having babies?
Says, will having children with white people help solve racism, white supremacy?
No. Some people, I used to think that if enough black people and white people jump in bed with each other and have sexual intercourse, white supremacy would disappear. All right, there would be no more white supremacy because that's about as intimate as you can get. There's plenty of sexual intercourse between white and non-white. And I looked at that and thought about it for over a period of time, and I looked at the evidence. There's no evidence that does that at all. In fact, it gives strength to the system of white supremacy. Why? Because white supremacy is still in place. See, that should be the last thing that should happen. The first order of business is for people to be able to communicate without the sexual intercourse, just like one person, one male with one female. Be able to communicate first. Get all of the communications, get all of the understanding first before bedtime, before sexual intercourse. Everybody who has attempted to make a so-called constructive relationship, that you do that by starting with sexual intercourse. The sexual intercourse comes, but you don't start with that. You take care of the other areas of activity first. Even among creatures who are not as, you might say, as sophisticated as people, among other creatures, beings in the known universe, these creatures, they build their nests first. They get everything in order first. And then they start laying their eggs.
Yes.
All right? They prepare meticulously. A bird will fly back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, getting little twigs together and make that nest. Then the bird will engage in sexual activity and become impregnated and then go to the nest. You got to have a nest. You got to have somewhere to put those eggs.
Right.
You just don't lay them in the middle of the street.
Exactly.
All right? And so, you make preparations first. So therefore, the race issue is the same way. I used to think that if enough black people and white people just feverishly just went at each other in the bedroom, sexual intercourse, nonstop, all right? And then we would come out of that bed, race problem solved. No, no. It just makes it worse, and it gives strength to the system of white supremacy. Why? Because they control it. You keep doing this under the system of white supremacy, all you have is just child molestation.
Right.
And more of it.
Okay.
It's like the warden going into the cell of the prisoner, having sexual intercourse with if it's a male warden, having sexual intercourse with all of the female prisoners. The warden is still the warden. And I'm gaining the idea that this is the better idea. All right? He's not going to let these prisoners go. He's just going to keep doing what he's doing. Why? Because he's doing what he's doing to his advantage. But it's not to the advantage of the prisoners. The females in there, in the cells, they're having babies, which is just like the master of the plantation. They had babies all over the place by the slaves, but they did not claim the babies as being their own. And so that's been proven by the system of white supremacy. White people have babies, black females have babies, black, brown, red, yellow, people of color. They have babies by white people all the time. On the first contact, they start having babies. But that hasn't solved the race problem. The record shows that has not solved the race problem. All it's done is confuse the victims of racism, all right, and got them squabbling among themselves about shades of black. Black, brown, red, yellow, they even have a term now that we've been using for years. It makes no sense at all. They say black people and brown people. Well, most people who are classified as black are brown, or huge numbers of them anyway. I don't know what the actual figures are. How black is black? How brown is brown? How brown do you get before you cross the line and now you're black? See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
This is all to the advantage of whom? The white supremacists. Because they do all the classifying anyway.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
All righty. When we come back off of the break, we will have Mr. Fuller answer the remaining 2 questions. Remember that our topic is, have you read the code book? We want to give special shout-outs to Jane Lance, B.W. Gifts, Helen Nance, and Tony Greer. Okay, Mr. Fuller, wrapping up that question. Keep in mind that we are speaking about have you read the code. The first question was, will racism and white supremacy end if black people do nothing but wait for it to die out?
Oh, well, yes. Probably, but what would be the point in that when, in my opinion, we are put here to solve problems? And the race problem is the biggest problem between people that exist on the planet. That's the conclusion I have come to. That's the priority. Everybody on the planet should say, my priority, my reason for breathing. My reason for breathing is to spend all the time that I possibly can trying to figure out ways and means of replacing the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. Why? Because the system of white supremacy is the biggest stumbling block, the biggest barrier to the production of justice on the planet that we call Earth.
Okay.
That's the conclusion I have come to.
All righty.
So everybody should wake up in the morning and go to bed at night trying to do everything they can to think about ways. What can I do? What can I do as an individual person to end racism and replace it with justice?
All righty.
As my assignment for being on this planet. That I have a creator. The creator gave me an assignment. The assignment is to do what? Solve problems. Now, how did I come to that conclusion? Because we got problems. So if you got problems, you look around and say, now, wait a minute, how many problems do I have? Well, you got all kinds. You got thousands. You got thousands of problems, all right? From the time you get out of bed, even going to bed, you got a problem going to bed. When you go to bed, how to go to bed, where's the bed that you're going to go to bed, all right? And how you going to get a bed to go to. See, you got all kinds of problems around you all the time.
Yes, sir.
And we were created in a universe, and we were dumped off in it by a creator, or creators, some people say, different gods, or a god, that put us here and gave us problems to solve.
Okay.
Whatever created us could have put us here with no problems to solve. But
yes.
we were given problems because we have problems. That's why we know it.
All righty.
And we were given tools, hands, eyes, a brain, feet, legs, vaginas, phalluses, all right, to solve problems. Wiring systems, I mean, that are called nerves and whatnot.
Yes, sir.
That house things that we can't even really fully understand, called emotions and whatnot.
All right.
But all of this is supposed to be to solve problems.
Solve problems.
And the biggest problem when we look around, what is the problem that gets in everybody's way in every area of activity? Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The biggest problem that keeps coming up in every last one of those areas of activity, regardless of which way you go, is what color somebody is. Everybody runs into that and starts squabbling about it.
Okay.
You can't get an education without talking about color. All right? Wait a minute. I mean, how are we going to go about getting this education? We got different people of different colors here. All right? So what kind of system are we going to set up? All right? We got to really think about this. What kind of economic system are we going to have? Who's going to get how much money? I mean, and who's going to spend time and energy doing this and doing that? The area of labor. Who's going to do certain types of work? Certain types of work we categorize as easy work. Certain types of work we categorize as hard work. They call it hard labor. Okay? Well, we're going to have to do that on the basis of color. You're going to do labor on the basis of what color somebody is? Oh, yeah. I mean, we're going to do everything on the basis of what color somebody is. This is all about what color somebody is. Well, what about religion? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, you just can't put all the people together, I mean, in harmony and whatnot. I mean, no, you're going to have religious squabbles. You're going to have religious wars. And the base of it is the reason most people can't practice their religion, that it's supposed to be all about carrying out God's will, but they run into a color problem. And they say, well, certain things we just can't do. I mean, for God, without considering what color somebody is. I mean, we got to stop and go back to the drawing board on this.
Mm-hmm.
Sex, for sure. All right. How many different people of different colors are you going to have mix and match? I mean, when it comes to sex. Oh, well, now sex is very important now, so we got to consider color now. when we start talking about bedtime and sexual intercourse and all that, we got to consider color.
Okay, we got to keep it moving here.
Yes, sir.
So let's do this. Go to the phone lines. Caller, you are now on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Hey, how y'all doing? I first want to say I was so encouraged and impressed by Mr. Fuller and his work. I'm currently a police officer. I've been a police officer for 11 years. So what I put together to try to eliminate injustice, I created a comic book. I am the only officer in history with the most felony arrests and charges ever in history. I also made Officer of the Year. So what I designed, the name of the comic book is called Hoverman Cop, Season of What. And I've already spoken to over 2,000 kids since I've launched the comic book. It's been 3 weeks. And I'm teaching kids and I'm going around and I'm trying to eliminate injustice in that way, in that concept. And that's my mission now, being encouraged and just enlightened by Mr. Fuller and his work. And that's my mission, to eliminate justice in that way. And I plan on going all over the world to do just that. All
righty. There wasn't a question in there, but if you have a question, you can ask.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I will do that. My question is to Mr. Fuller is, when I come across conflict in the process of trying to eliminate injustice, which I have already, what's the best way to deal with confrontation?
Okay.
When it comes to dealing with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your call. Mr. Fuller?
Well, conflict makes, as a result of some type of problem that's in the making or a problem that already exists. So that's where all conflict comes from. So how do you resolve conflict? Your conflict is under the category of a problem, all right? So we're put here to solve problems. What's the best way to solve problems according to the code? Best way to solve problems is through the process of questions and answers, because history has shown, and everybody can put that to a test, that everything starts with questions and answers in problem solving. There's a problem, so you have a question. The question even is right from the beginning: is there a problem? And then why is there a problem? What makes the problem? Okay? So these are questions. So you start off with questions in all problem solving. All right? And every question has an answer. Even if the initial answer is, I don't know. That's how you know that you got to get on it and find out. All right? That's the answer to all questions. That's the initial answer to all questions. What's the answer to this question? I don't know. All right? Okay, why don't you know? Well, because I never recognized that I needed to know. All right, now that you need to know, now what are you going to do? Now that's where the process starts. And that's how all problems are solved, through the process of questions and answers, finding the answers to every question. And so how do you do it when you're talking to people and there's conflict? The minute that conflict starts, go into the question mode. I mean, conflict usually comes from starting with statements. When people are interacting with each other, if you notice that, everybody's making statements. Everybody's making judgments and evaluations. Don't do this, don't do that. Somebody telling somebody what to do or what not to do. These are all statements. These are not questions. So when you start asking, okay, you're saying do this and do that, okay, well, rather than say, I'm not going to do it, and you don't have the right to tell me to do it, now you got what you call an argument. And arguments usually just keep escalating into what we call war. You have minor conflict, then you have major conflict, then you just have all-out conflict, on a scale that somebody might get hurt. But if you just go into the question and answer mode, you say, okay, do we have a problem here? That's a question. What is the problem? And like in the textbook, just recently, that was one of the last things I put into the revised expanded edition, and I recited it on this program. And that is, and I put it under economics because it has to do with time and energy. And I say these are the four most important questions that you could actually ask. And everybody, when you answer these questions, ask and answer these 4 questions, it should take everybody right where they need to be.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And so what is that first question? What do you want to do? And sometimes you can kind of interject, what do you want me to do? Okay? But the basic question is, what do you want to do? Because everybody wants to do something. Every creature wants to do something. Birds, bees, ants, they want to do something.
Number 2.
All right, number 2. Why do you want to do it? This thing that you say you want to do, why do you want to do it? Okay? Number 3, how do you plan to do it? Now, that one really stumps people right out the gate a lot of times, you know, but it starts them to thinking.
Right.
Wait a minute, I want to do something. I got a reason for doing it, but do I have a plan for doing it?
And number 4?
All right. And number 4, this is really the clincher. Number 4 is, what do you expect the constructive result to be? After you do this thing that you have wanted to do, planned to do, you knew why you were doing it, but now what do you expect the constructive result to be? And underline that word constructive.
Yes, sir.
See, because somewhere right now somebody's planning to carjack somebody. All right? Now, what do you expect the constructive result to be over a long period of time? And you think that you're going to be a hotshot carjacker. How long do you think that you can be a hotshot carjacker? All right? And get rich doing that, jacking cars.
Yes.
Running up to people at a filling station and say, give me your keys, MF, you know, and push them out of the way and jump in the car and take off down the street. Now, you think you're going to retire in Florida with a whole lot of money in the bank doing that?
No.
See, I'm just giving a practical example
Okay.
of people wanting to do things.
Okay.
All right, you better think it through. What's going to be the constructive result?
All righty, we got to keep it moving, and thank the police officer for his call. Normally, we would take this particular time to talk about your book, but we got somebody on the line. We'll talk about your book right after the phone call. Okay, caller, you're now on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Hello, my name is Janessa, and I am a big admirer of your work, Mr. Fuller, and I encourage everyone to not only listen to the program weekly, but to also read the codebook. My question is, besides the Civil War, has there ever been a direct blow to the system of white supremacy? And if not, what do you think would be the best constructive place to start?
Mr. Fuller?
The most constructive place to start is to start thinking about codifying everything and starting with those 4 questions on the economics. You know, what do you want to do? Well, you should want to solve problems. Your problems. The problems you have as an individual. And so, now that plan part, that third part of that question, how do you plan to do it? Well, you plan to do it by having a code for doing it. See, everyone should have a code, not Neely Fuller's code, your own code, because, you know, you can use mine as a platform, as a start to thinking in the correct direction, I hope, all right, just what I've written. But some people have asked me, Fuller, where's the whole code? Do you have the whole code? I say, there's no such thing as a whole code until all problems are solved throughout the entire universe. See? So everybody's supposed to be having a code. A code is nothing but a plan that works.
Absolutely.
That's all in it. You know, literally, that's all a code is. A plan that every time you do it, it works.
Okay. And what was the first part of your question, ma'am? I forgot.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. The first question, Mr. Fuller, was besides the Civil War, in your lifetime, has there ever been another direct blow to the system of white supremacy?
Okay.
Besides what now?
Civil War. Besides the Civil War.
It has never been, the system of white supremacy either is or it isn't. You don't measure it in increments like victories that we have had and defeats that we have had. It's all been defeats. See, this is another way of looking at it. Everything we have done so far has failed. See, it ain't over until it's over.
Yes, sir.
See, we don't look at it like you get paid for yardage in football. All right? 50 yards on line, and you're the best player on a losing team, but you're the best player. That doesn't work. I mean, it's either all done or it isn't.
So you think we still lost the Civil War?
You don't measure progress. You don't say we're making progress ever. We'll say if you mention the word progress, the progress has been zero. Why? Because racism is still here. The only way you measure counter-racist activity is when you look at, if you compare it to a game, the lights out in the stadium and everybody's gone and it's all over. That's the way you look at it. Until that actually happens, you are failing. You're failing until you succeed. And the success means no more racism, and it's been completely replaced with the system of justice, which is guaranteeing that no person is being mistreated, and every person that needs constructive help is getting it.
All right. Thank you for your call. We appreciate that. Mr. Fuller, this is the time that we need to talk about the book. So for the next few minutes, just talk about the book.
You can get the book by going to producejustice.com, which is the purpose of the book, by the way. Producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of the basic textbook, the expanded revised edition, and from the 1984 edition, which I want to reiterate, the 1984 edition is still valid. It's not obsolete. So if you still have that book, for those who got it, you can still use it. I mean, truth does not become obsolete.
Yes.
The solution to problems, I mean, it will vary from time to time. That's why I have a revised expanded edition, all right, in order to take into account some nuances and whatnot. But basically, the approach to solving the problem of racism is still the same. It'll be continuous, and you use the same techniques as long as they work. When you find something that works, that's forever.
That's an interesting statement. So does that mean that truth stays truth, or as they say in Baltimore, the truth stayed truth?
The truth by definition, according to the code, is what? That which is. That which is what? That which is whatever it is. All right? In other words, if you do something, if you pick up a hammer and get a nail, and you take that hammer and hit that nail, and the nail going into the wood helps you to build a house, and you keep repeating that, and every time you do it, you wind up with a house, what does that mean? That's codification. That's what that means. That is the essence of codification. Proof. That works.
Okay.
The hammer and the nail into some wood, and you keep doing that and doing that over and over again. Next thing you know, you have a house built out of wood.
Okay.
All right. And if every time you do it, that seems to be the result.
Oh, great.
That's code. All right. If you don't do it and that's not the result, then that's not code.
Okay.
Just that simple.
Got to keep it moving. ProduceJustice.com, correct?
Yes. ProduceJustice.com.
Okay. Let's go to the phone lines here in our remaining moments here. Go ahead, caller. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Caller, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please. Okay, they're not there? Okay. Okay, we gave him a chance. Sorry about that, caller. Okay, Mr. Fuller, this comes from Mr. Johnson, who, as a matter of fact, resides in the city that you're in. He says, Mr. Fuller, can a person speak on racism if he or she has a white spouse? And if so, should we suspect him or her on being deceptive and a collaborator to white supremacy?
The answer is yes to both questions. But let me make this clear so we have understanding. Okay? On that second part, okay? The second part is yes, and you say we are collaborators. All right. Does that make that person, because that person is so-called wedded or bedded down with a white person and the person is non-white, does that make that person a collaborator with white supremacists? And the answer is yes. All right? But what about the person who is just in the prison system of white supremacy, like myself? Is Neely Fuller a collaborator, writing a book about white supremacy, but he's still collaborating? Is he collaborating? You know, because he's written a book, does that exempt him from being a collaborator, a person that helps to support white supremacy? And the answer is Neely Fuller is supporting white supremacy from the very time that he was born, and even before he was born, being carried in his mother's womb. There hasn't been a single minute that Neely Fuller has not supported the system of white supremacy. And if you are a person classified as non-white on the planet Earth, even if you are dead, you are supporting the system of white supremacy.
Okay.
Why? Because the system of white supremacy is the only government on the planet.
Okay.
So if you're walking around breathing on this planet called the planet Earth, now it'd be a different situation on other planets. I don't know about other planets.
Right.
But if you're on this planet Earth, you are supporting the system of white supremacy because that's the only system in place.
Okay. Then
there is no other system.
Now, the first part of that, he says, can a person speak on racism if he or she has a white spouse?
Absolutely. Everybody, including the white spouse, is supposed to be speaking against racism, including what they are doing. I'm supposed to be speaking against what I'm doing because I support racism. You know, there's no way around it. That's our job. That's everybody's job. Every white person is supposed, even as they practice racism, is supposed to be speaking against racism and trying to learn how to not be a racist. All right? But, I mean, so that's the way, that is it. That is it. You can't work outside of what you're in.
Yeah, that's true.
You're born in a system of racism.
Mm-hmm.
You're born a prisoner of war if you're non-white. So you can't work outside of what you're already inside of. All right? You got to work from the inside and just eliminate the thing that you're inside of.
Yes.
And replace it with something better. All right?
Okay.
That's the way that works.
All right.
So therefore, nobody can put anybody up or down and whatnot. You know, we are attacking the system of racism, and naturally we have to speak against the people who practice racism, who are white. You know?
Exactly. Okay.
And,
no,
but we do collaborate with our prison masters.
Okay.
All right.
We are up against it, so this is what I'm going to do. To the callers that are on the line, hang on. We're going to get you on the other side of the opening. And let me say this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the pleasure of your time. TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio the way it should be heard. Stay tuned for the second hour.
Talktainment Radio, worldwide sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
Live call-in talk show. Dial 1-877-932-9766 and join the conversation here on TalkTainmentRadio.com.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Alrighty, welcome back for the second hour of the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on TalkTainmentRadio.com. That's radio the way it should be heard. I am Mr. Bobby, and I am the co-host of the program. Thank you for listening. We are going to have a special announcement at some point in this radio show. You can get in contact with the program by calling 1-877-932-9766. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. You can watch the live broadcast of the compensatory concept by going to YouTube and typing in the word Talktainment. Hit the space bar, type in the word radio, scroll down to Talktainment number 2 live on YouTube, where you can watch the program. While you are there, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. And you can also do this. Go to Facebook.com/Talktainment to hear the program. But we would prefer you go to TalkTainmentRadio.com, hit the programs, which was on the screen there, but hit for programs and then for the podcast, and then you can go down to Mr. Fuller. You can download it if you'd like. By the way, you can also hear this program again at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are on 24 hours a day. I am told that there's some few people that call or are regular contributors. Lost the paper. Jane Lance is one. LaShawna King, Eric Williams, Helen Nance, Don Mishner, B.W. Gifts, Terrence Morgan, Tony Greer. We thank you for your communications, all of them. We thank you for contributing, all of you that do that. Okay, now let's. Our topic today, by the way, is since you have the book and many have purchased the book, do you read the code book? And the reason why that has come up is because I'm looking at some of the Gmails, and they are indicative of people who have not read the book. And Mr. Fuller has gone over his statement that he has made at the beginning of every hour and sometimes during the program, which says, if you do not understand white supremacy racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. If you didn't hear what he had to say in the first hour, get the, or rather go back, play it back and hear what he had to say. Is very powerful. With that in mind, we will go to the phone lines. Malaya Whitehouse, we're going to get you next. Caller, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead.
Yes, and I think that's me.
Yes, that's you, dear.
Okay, thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you so much, Mr. Fuller. And yes, I have the old book, and I have read my book. I try to practice from the book. I've outlined the book. I've highlighted the book. The highlight is wearing out. And the thing I have that I've analyzed and analyzed and analyzed, and I sit and I think sometimes for hours at a time. And I've had this, and I'm going to make a comment, and then I have the question.
Okay.
The comment is that I've had many different conversations with people about heaven. And they tell me that, you know, it's this place, and then they look up. And I said, but heaven is not only when you look up, it's as far as you look to the left, as far as you look to the right, and it was invisible beneath our feet. As far as you look down, it's endless also. So then the question is, how can I talk with people and approach the concept of justice when they believe that that deep suffering is the way to go to heaven, and I'm trying to tell them that we're already in the heaven. We're in it. We're just a tiny planet on a tiny, going around a tiny star. But there's this, how do I approach this?
Okay.
I've rung it out.
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
Questions and answers. Like, that's a question. And when people talk, they're usually, when people communicate, because that's where the problem is between people, including the victims of racism themselves. How do we talk to each other and minimize conflict? Okay? It's all questions and answers. We just keep asking questions and coming up with the correct answers to every question. And you don't move to the second question before you answer the first question. All right?
So
always keep that in mind. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, so there's a belief that suffering, for some, I mean, these are people I'm talking to, there's a belief that suffering is good because it's going to guarantee them a place in heaven. And I'm saying, but we need to be talking about justice. And
in other words, they're basing it on, and if I understand what you're saying, they're basing it on the requirements of their religion.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
And they say their religion requires them to suffer.
Yes, it's suffering, bearing your cross.
Okay, well, you can simply ask questions about that. You say, well, how much suffering do you need, all right, in order to meet your quota, your requirement, according to your religion?
Yeah.
Wow. Would you like to give me all of your money? All right.
That's getting a lot of laughs around
here. That's one way you can suffer.
Yeah.
Whatever money you have, lady, you just told me, what you want is a whole lot of suffering. Okay, well, hey, it's no shortage of that. Now, so are you willing? Because I need money. Do you have any money? See, that's a question. You can start right in. I mean, and not do it in a joking fashion.
Right.
You can just simply say, that is okay. The problem is you don't have enough suffering. Okay. All right. Now, do you have any money in your purse right now, ma'am? All right. I mean, if you know the person on a one-on-one basis, you say, Alice, do you have any money in your purse right now? And say, oh, yes, I just got paid. I got my check. Well, will you give me your check? Because I don't like suffering. My religion calls for me not to, to try to eliminate suffering.
Wow.
Okay? So you can help me with my religion, and at the same time not violate your religion. Just give me your money, and you suffer. You get put out on the street at the end of the month, and you be homeless. And I will drive by in my car that I just bought with your money. All right? And look at you suffer and say, are you suffering enough today? Because I'll be back tomorrow. Maybe you might have something else I can get.
Wow. Thank you so much for your call. That was an excellent call.
Thank you for the response, because I will definitely ask that very question.
Yeah, you can ask, hey, man, all the suffering that you have, you ask them, can you take your suffering and dump it on them? Let them pay all your bills. All right? And that way they will fulfill all the requirements of the suffering that they have to do, and you will get rid of your suffering, and that way you'll fulfill all the requirements of your religion, which is to eliminate suffering.
All right.
All right? Everybody will be happy.
All right. Thank you, caller. That was an excellent call, and I know Mr. Fuller was not in a jovial way, but, she asked the question, and that was the answer. That was a good one. Even the staff back here, they're just falling out the chairs laughing at that. Okay. All righty, let's move along here. This is from Miss Whitehouse. She says this, Mr. Fuller. Martin Luther King was threatened by many racists who sent him letters and tried to bomb his home. Mr. Fuller, have you ever been threatened by the white supremacists for writing the code book? And how do you handle getting death threats for doing counter-racist work?
I've never received any. I'm completely ignored. I've had white people come and sit and listen to my talks, and the only thing, it was just 2 occasions where a white person even said anything, and I'll say 2 situations. One situation repeated itself over and over again. That's the major one. People would come down when I used to be on the road talking in colleges and whatnot, and at the Dr. Wilson Institute, every now and then some white people would show up, and most of what they would say, if they said anything at all, they would come down and say, what you're saying is very interesting. It's very interesting, very thoughtful, very thoughtful. That's what they would say. And then they'd walk off. All right? Now, the other occasion is, I was in New York City in the early 1990s, and 2 white males came down the aisle shouting, at me. And they said, "You are homophobic." So I immediately tried to respond by telling them to come forward and make their case, because that's a serious charge, all right? And, anytime somebody says you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, and that's what I interpreted that to mean, that, that they were saying I was homophobic. I wanted them to come down and explain what they meant by that.
Yes.
But before I could respond, they ran out of the place.
What?
I said, "Gentlemen, but they ran back up the aisle and ran right out of the building, okay?
What was that?
After shouting at me.
Uh-huh.
All right? They just said, "You are homophobic," and then started running. And that's been the only responses that I have gotten from white people the whole time I have been out here.
Okay.
Something like 40 years. Those two scenarios. The major scenario is they come down, one or two will come down and say, "What you're saying is very interesting," and then walk off.
Homophobic?
But I've never had any of them say, "Hey, we're going to do a job on you." Nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not even any hostility.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But they said you were homophobic.
And now I have come to the conclusion of what that means.
Okay.
For the most part.
What does that mean?
Why there is absolute silence when it comes to my material on the part of white people.
Okay.
They don't review my book, and if they do, they talk about it among themselves, because I haven't heard of anybody saying anything in all the years I've been out. I've been on podiums with white people. They don't make any comment on anything that I say. I'll stand up and say something. They're right there listening to me say it. No comment at all.
But
and if I recall correctly, when they are asked about what I've said, they say no comment.
Okay. So
I interpret that as meaning this. The way to handle people like Fuller is to completely ignore him and try to get everybody else, by example, to ignore him.
Okay.
And he'll just die on the vine, and his message will die on the vine. Because if we mention anything about it, whether you support it or whether you attack it, and certainly if you attack it, that's the conclusion I've come to, Neely Fuller's come to. The reason white people haven't said nothing about what I write or what I say or the way I interpret things and all like that is because it will get attention.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Because once, black people are peculiar that way, We don't really pay attention to anything until white people start paying attention.
Oh, okay. So
they know that.
These two people ran down, let me get this straight. They ran down halfway or whatever to where you were speaking at, claimed or said that you were homophobic and ran out. Is that correct?
And ran out of the place.
And ran out of the place. Wow. Okay. For that being said, let's go to the phone lines. Line number 1. You are now on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead with your question.
Hello?
Yes. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, Mr. Bobby, it's Mr. Myrto from the so-called French.
Yeah, your question was getting ready to come up, but go ahead.
Yeah, because, so first of all, good morning, sir, and good morning, Mr. Fuller. How are you doing?
Mr. Fuller, he said, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm still
okay, all right.
Okay, so I have a question. I already addressed the question directly to Mr. Fuller, but I thought it could be interesting if meanwhile he have an answer for the question, so it could help maybe all the listeners, because I have all the books Mr. Fuller has written, the first edition, the second edition, and also the Word Guide. And in the second edition, I have noticed something that on the page 145, there is 10 points that have been mentioned, but one point is missing, and it is about administrative gerrymander. So I would like to know if, meanwhile, Mr. Fuller could give us an explanation, because last time he could not give it to me. I could understand because it's something he has written since so long. But does Mr. Fuller, meanwhile, have found something to help us concerning this point?
Okay, Mr. Fuller, about administrative gerrymandering. His email or Gmail was just right up here. I was getting ready to read it to you, but thank you for calling, Myrto. Mr. Fuller, about administrative gerrymandering?
Yes, administrative gerrymandering was the description for that was left out. of the book. And the gentleman who's calling has pointed that out to me. But in a compensatory way, until I find a way to get it in there, because there is a description of that. I usually define the terms that I use, but I didn't define that term, nor did I further discuss it. I just use it as a label, administrative gerrymandering, under the umbrella title of administrative subversion that the white supremacists do. Okay, because I mentioned other things like administrative espionage, administrative harassment and intimidation, administrative royalism, which is the whole basis for racism, but I didn't explain what administrative gerrymandering is. But there is, and I had it in my notes to go into the book, but it didn't go in there. Maybe in a future edition I'll put in there. In fact, I think it's essential that I do. But it's any willful and deliberate speech and action, writings, recordings, or anything like that, that records, positions, conditions, relationships, and or specific circumstances in a manner that results in an advantage being given to one person and a disadvantage being rendered to another person in any one or more areas of activity. That's basically what it is. So until that shows up, you can just use the word gerrymander the way that most dictionaries in any language use it, whatever it means, and use it within that context. Because really all of these administrative subversions are just labels anyway, describing how the white supremacists subvert everything that non-white people do that looks like it's going to be a danger to the system of white supremacy. So administrative gerrymandering, just like administrative harassment, like on jobs and whatnot, administrative brutality. Well, you know, what is administrative brutality? Which that is in the book and a description of it. But it can be administrative gerrymandering. It can also mean the harassment and intimidation.
Yes.
See, because what is brutality? Brutality is just being brutal. And what is being brutal? Any type of doing mistreatment is brutality. I kind of use it within the ballpark, you might say, of the word poverty or the word violence. Like Gandhi said that poverty is the worst form of violence. Now, when people think of violence, they think of something like somebody hitting somebody over the head or dropping a bomb.
Yes.
But see, it depends on how you want to use words. But Gandhi said that poverty is the worst form of violence. You know, that's worse than hitting somebody over the head.
Right.
Just putting them in a situation where they are impoverished. They can't get ahead. They can't, just doing nothing but just long-term suffering until you die. That's what poverty does. Mm-hmm. So Gandhi said that if you start talking about violence and nonviolence, because people talked about violence and nonviolence during the time of Gandhi, I mean, whether you should have violence or whether you should have nonviolence or whether you should have counter-violence. And Gandhi said, well, if you talk about violence, poverty is the worst form of violence. If you really want to violate people, you put them in poverty.
Okay.
All right? But usually people don't think of poverty and violence as being one and the same. But if you think about it, it is. And so it's the same with brutality. It's the same with gerrymander.
Okay.
It's the same with any type of mistreatment.
Administrative.
These are just words that mean the same thing, really.
Administrative gerrymandering. Okay. Let's do this. Okay, let's take this call. Caller, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Hey, good morning, Mr. Bob and Mr. Fuller. This is Malcolm calling from Orlando.
Okay, Malcolm.
Mr. Fuller, my question for you today is, can you explain or maybe go into more detail or give an example of how not knowing what white supremacy and racism is can only confuse you, or the things that you know will only confuse you if you do not know what racism and white supremacy is? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
explain what not knowing what.
Yeah, basically what you did at the first hour. Maybe he didn't get to what you mentioned about it.
What white supremacy
yes,
is.
Mm-hmm.
White supremacy is just dominating and mistreating people based on color and non-color. If you want a format for it, just use the idea and the concept and the practice of royalism. In other words, royalty means the king can do no wrong. That's ancient royalism. Anything that the king does is right.
Anything?
The king is right even when he's wrong.
What?
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's the essence of royalism. Look at the history of emperors and kings. You don't question the king. You know, the king said it, so therefore, I mean, that's it. You don't go any further than that. I mean, you know, and people would knock on people's doors at midnight and drag people out and kill them and whatnot and say, we're doing it in the name of the king. This is the king's order.
Yeah.
People would say, well, that's why you're doing this. The king said so.
Wait a minute.
Well, nobody speaks against the king.
Help me understand something, Mr. Fuller. Okay, you said the king does this. Would that be equivalent to saying, for example, if you are a president and then you would say, I have the right to pardon myself. Is that the same ballpark?
Well, see, here's what. People who became president means preside. Kings don't preside, kings dictate. Ancient kings and emperors dictate. Dictate means, hey, when I say it, you better believe it and go along with it. When I say do this, you better do it. There ain't going to be no debate. Because ancient, warriors and whatnot, I mean, who are beholden to the king, because every warrior had to take oath to be, with the dictator, with the king. All right? So the king said, off with your head is coming off. I mean, no debate, no rebuttals, no discussion. The king says, hey, chop his head off. He just insulted me. Chop his head off. Your head is gone. All right? That's royalty. That's ancient royalty. That's why some white people said, this thing about royalty, I don't like it. Because some people are considered to be members of the royal family, and they can do anything they want to, and other people are considered to be servants to people who can do anything they want to. And I don't like that. So white people had fights among themselves. All people had fights among themselves about that, about this thing about kings and queens.
Yeah.
And the royalty and whatnot.
Okay.
All right? So they rebelled. But here's what. They became royal over other people based on color, and that's where we get to that part about racism.
Okay.
See, I mean, if you look at the history of white supremacy, they were fighting back and forth among themselves about who's going to be in charge, who's going to be, who's going to be the dictators, and who's going to carry out the orders of the dictator.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they broke away from the people who were dictating them. They said, hey, we're out of here. We're going to get away from you, so you can't tell us what to do no more. So they travel great distances. But when they travel great distances, they found some new people. And they say, you know what? These people, they don't know anything about how we do business. We do business on the basis of royalty. All right? And so what we will do, since these are new people, we will be royal over them.
Oh, okay.
And it'll be real easy to do because it would be done on the basis of what color they are.
Gotcha.
And that was the essence of white supremacy.
White supremacy. Okay.
It turned out to be the strongest and most effective form of royalty ever dreamed of.
Okay. Got to keep it moving. Let's go to the phone line. What line? 1? Okay. Line number 1, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hello, this is Elemental P Nation calling from Hong Kong. I have a question for Mr. Fuller. Other groups take care of themselves, like the Spanish look out for the Spanish, the Asians look out for the Asians, but it seems like black people, we want to look out for everybody else, and while we keep getting abused, should we have the mindset of we should just take care of our own people and just kind of have like a racist mindset, but not mistreating other groups, but just taking care of our own group and have priority among ourselves and other groups?
Mr. Fuller?
Well, a lot of people say that, but that's not logical, because white supremacy says anybody of color comes under white supremacy. Now, if anybody of color doesn't like that arrangement, you all fight it out among yourselves, but don't fight me. And a lot of black people have bought into that. In other words, don't pay any attention to you, even though you're telling us all what to do. But we prisoners down here in the prison yard, we can fight among ourselves about whatever grievances we have. I mean, because the way you have divided us up, black, brown, red, yellow, okay, so in the prison yard, the black people are going to fight the brown people in the prison yard, in your prison. And that's what you say is the best arrangement. I'll throw some scraps or some crumbs down there to all of you, and you all fight over them. And so a lot of black people say that, yeah, because we got to look out for our group, even though we're all prisoners, and them other prisoners just look out there for their group as prisoners. But the code says, no, what you do, all of you who are victims of racism, get rid of the power of the racists. That's the code. That's the position I have taken. No. I ain't getting that prison yard fighting over scraps that they throw us. That ain't doing nothing. That's just making the prison system stronger and making us weaker as prisoners, because we spend all our time watching each other. Black people do it. See, we have even narrowed it down finer than that. Black people slaughter more black people than anybody else, all right, on a day-to-day basis. All right? Why? Because the white supremacists have set it up that way. They can set it up in, as long as you're the master, you can set it up any way that you want to. You can set up so that you can say, okay, what you black people, stop having a beef with me. It's these Koreans in your neighborhood. That's who you should go out there and kill. You should burn down their places, and then your problems will be solved. But they're lying, because your problem is not solved when you do that. Because what they're going to do is sit back and watch you burn down all the Korean businesses, and then they're going to say, okay, now you burn down the Korean businesses, and that's good, all right, because we don't care nothing about them no way. And then you say, okay, now that we have done that, can we have our own businesses? And the white supremacists just say, hey, if I wanted you to have your own businesses, I never would have sent down the Koreans down there to open up businesses among you in the first place. But y'all so dumb, y'all haven't caught on to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm the master. I don't care how you move the checkers around on the board. I'm going to still be the winner.
All right.
You are going to still be beholden to me, regardless of who comes and goes.
Okay.
So y'all just continue fighting among yourselves, because that's what I want you to do. It'll keep you busy.
All right. Thank you for the call from Hong Kong. Thank you. Have you read the code book? Mr. Neely Fuller has been discussing that, and we've been taking your calls, and they have been some excellent calls today. One clarification on the donation, that is for the second hour only, not for the first hour. We do that. It's for the second hour. Somebody wrote in and called in and was wondering about, was it the full show? No, it's only for the second hour. You requested it, we've done that, but there are different things that need to be done, and TalkTameRadio.com is efforting to make sure that that happens for you. Okay. Mr. Fuller, listen, you can get in contact with the show by calling 1-877-932-9766. Gmail me, numeral 7, Mr. Bobby at gmail.com. Go to go to the YouTube channel, and you can see the live broadcast of the compensatory concept. Type in the word Talktainment, hit the space bar, type in the word radio, scroll down to Talktainment number 2, live on YouTube, watch the live broadcast, subscribe please, and hit the like button, and facebook.com/Talktainment, you can do that, but this is the way that we would prefer you do it. Go to the TalkTainmentRadio.com homepage. Up at the top, it's not on the screen now. You hit programs, and then you'll slide down. You see podcast, and then Mr. Fuller's show is on Wednesdays, And you can simply download that and listen to this. There it is right there on the screen. Listen to this. You can also hear the program tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, the entire 2 hours. Tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. I think that's every Wednesday, and Talktainment, as you well know, is on 24 hours a day. We are making some changes, and they are going to be good. Okay, let's do this. This comes from Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper, we got you. Here it is. It says, Mr. Fuller, my question is, can you, Mr. Fuller, elaborate on the concept of, quote, environmental error factors, end of quote, listed at the bottom of page 138 of the revised code book? By the way, Mr. Fuller, keep up your excellent work.
And what page do I have?
He said page 138 at the bottom, and I'm looking at it, where it says what exactly is an environmental error factor.
All right, yes, I have it here. I have my book, too.
Okay.
All right, page 138. Well, it explains itself. What exactly is an environmental error factor? Is that the question?
Let's see. Can you elaborate?
Oh, okay.
On the concept of environmental error factors.
This is in the 8th area of activity, which is labor. So
it says 4 here.
I started not to put this in the book, but because I thought it was too narrowly focused. The entire code book is supposed to be written for the entire world. And some people may not know what that would be about. But, in some places, people think that they are working independently on jobs and whatnot. But you can apply it to whatever job you have. And on second thought, when I started thinking about whether to put it into the book or not, environmental error factors, it came about. The history of it is on my job. I started noticing things because I had a job at one time that I retired from, and I started noticing things that were out of order. In other words, people were being accused of things and on the job, and I noticed it kept coming up. People would say, well, you should have done this and you should have done that, and if you hadn't have done this, this operation would have gone smoother. Or if you had done this, the operation would have gone smoother. Or you caused something to happen that should not have happened, and it was your fault, and therefore we're going to have to punish you. We're going to have to fire you, or we're going to have to demote you, or something like that on this job, on account of you did this, or you didn't do that, or you didn't do the other. And I started noticing in a lot of cases, it didn't have anything to do with what the person actually did per se. If you look at it on the surface, it would seem like the person made a mistake. But then when you looked at the conditions that the person had to work under, all right, the person didn't make a mistake. The mistake was made in the condition itself. I'm going to repeat that. The mistake was made, like on a job, in the condition that you were put in itself. There was a built-in mistake. And for example, it was probably a door that had, that was in the incorrect place. All right? The door shouldn't have ever been there for the first place. They never should have put a door at that particular place. So, but then you were put in a position where you were associated somehow with the door being there, all right, in the workplace. But on account of somebody might say that you should have been watching that door to see that nobody came through the door and stumbled over the equipment that was right on the other side of the door. Well, see, that's something that evolved and nobody noticed it. But it wasn't always like that. But somebody decided to put a door where this equipment was, and then that was 10 years ago, maybe before you even got on the job. And so because you were there and you didn't put up a sign saying, in a danger, say that you're a foreman or a supervisor or a poor lady, and there's a danger now that wasn't there before because the door wasn't there before. all right? But you never noticed that because you figured that the door is just a door. I mean, you know, but somebody put a door where it really shouldn't have been. So that set up a scenario that sooner or later someone was going to come through that door and trip over some materials. The materials were in place and should have been where they should have been, but the door should not have been there.
Right.
Now, I took a roundabout route to kind of explain that, you know, so that I wouldn't have to go through the whole thing or the whole pages about environmental error factors.
Okay.
But that's an example of what I meant.
Okay.
So you can study that in the workplace where you are. Sometimes they will have you doing something. And like I call it stacking and inching. I gave it those slang terms. I try to stay away from slang terms, but I made those up because they are made up terms, and when you make up a term, that means you're the person who has the power to explain the term.
Okay.
Why? Because nobody knows what it means but you.
Okay.
You made it up.
Before we move on,
yes, sir.
Before we move on, did you mean to say that you said it was in the 8th area, but in my book it's the 4th area under labor? Did you mean that, or was that a mistake, or what? But when you started off, you said in the 8th area, but in my book here it says the 4th area under labor, environmental error factors.
Yes, these environmental error factors are under labor.
Okay, gotcha. Right. Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, let's move.
If you look at the top of the page, it says Area 4, labor.
Yeah, but you had mentioned the 8th area, and I was anyway. Doesn't matter.
Did I say 8th area?
Yes.
Well, see, that's another one of those old age moments. I mean, you know,
okay,
that's really began to grab me. I mean, you know, even factors in my book wasn't as well written in 2016. Some people have told me that some things that I said in the original book are a whole lot better said than I did in the 2016 version.
Yeah.
The original book was the one that I always refer to. The original goes back to 1957.
Okay.
But I'm talking about the one that most people have is 1984.
All right. Well, anyway.
A lot of people have said that book is better written than the book that I have out here now.
Okay.
And I have considered putting that other book back on the market just for those people to be satisfied with that.
Very, very good. Okay, let's go. Keep it moving. Go to the caller. Go ahead, caller. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Hi. Good morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. I have a question for Mr. Fuller regarding law enforcement abusing and killing and murdering our people unjustly on camera.
Yes.
Yes. Whenever I watch these videos, I'm a victim of the system myself. I'm at my breaking point.
Hello?
These videos, I know Mr. Fuller.
Mm-hmm. Hello?
And I know Mr. Fuller said that,
hey, caller, you're breaking up. Mr. Fuller can't hear you, and I can't hear you either. You may want to try to call back because you're breaking up pretty badly. Mr. Fuller, give me a couple of minutes on your book before I get to Jane Lance's question.
Yes, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of the basic textbook and an additional book called A Compensatory Codified Counter-Racist Word Guide, and that's really an addition to the basic textbook. Most people get the basic textbook. Go to producejustice.com. The book is addressed to individual persons who perceive themselves as being victims of the system of white supremacy. And the book is not just giving you opinions about what white supremacy is and how it works, because they're strictly my opinions, but it also gives suggestions about what to do and what to say on a day-to-day basis in wherever you happen to be on the planet when it comes to anything directly or indirectly associated with racism. Things to do, things to not do.
Yes, sir.
Things to say, things to not say. You can go to and get the book by going to producejustice.com, and it's addressed to individual persons. So you don't have to check with anybody. You just pick out things that you think will work for you. And you say those things that you think that when you say them, they'll work for you.
Yes, sir.
If you don't think it'll work for you, don't say it. If you don't think something that you're going to do will work for you as an individual, then you don't do it. If you think it will, then you do it. They're just suggestions. Just page after page after page of things to do, things to not do.
All right.
Things to say, things to not say.
Okay, very, very good. Okay, back to the Gmails, 1-877-932-9766. In our remaining moments, Jane Land says this, and she doesn't mind people that I use her name. She says, as Mr. Fuller, I speak for other listeners as well as myself when I say that the stories you share from your past always have great lessons. Would you please tell us more about your time in the military and how you were treated when you returned to the U.S.? Thank you, JL.
Oh, well, it was really not a lot to say. When I was in the military, and that's another thing people have sometimes said, well, Fuller's lying, because he says sometimes he was in the Air Force, and then other times he sounds like he's talking like he was in the Army and in Korea on a battlefront. Now, which one of these lies is the truth? I mean, you know, well, the truth is I was in both branches at different times. I was drafted into the Army in 1951 and sent after 3 months basic training without knowing too much about what end of the rifle was the, you know, the business in. But I was sent right to the front lines in Korea in 1951 after 3 months basic training. They called us replacements, which means they said it's nothing lower than a replacement. That's what some of the sergeants told me when I got to Camp Drake, Japan. They say, you people are replacements for the people who are dead now. And you're going to fill in the gaps, which means somebody's going to be replacing you in a few months. Because most likely from this bunch that I'm looking at, you haven't had much training, so you're going to be dead. All right? So I was in that bunch. So I went to the front lines, but I managed to survive and whatnot. In fact, the worst thing I had to put up with was two basic things that came close to killing me. The weather, for one thing.
Oh, yeah.
Korean weather is brutal in the wintertime. Absolutely brutal. I mean, way below zero, okay? And you got no place to hide. All right, you're in a hole, and you just have to... I thought I was going to freeze to death, okay? And the other thing is, we were strafed. Strafing means planes coming over, firing at you. But these were not Chinese or Korean planes or Russian planes. They were the Navy planes, came off of carriers, and they fired at us in broad daylight. And so they call it friendly fire, but there's nothing friendly about it. And other than that, I saw dead bodies and all like that, but I never fired a shot myself, personally, the whole time I was there. And I was there the whole time I was there in Korea in 1951 and early 52. I was on the front lines in a combat unit, but I never fired a shot the whole time I was there.
Yes, sir.
They put me on the telephones. Now, experiences with racism, sure. It was right there in the unit I was in. I heard that, you know, the word nigger was used right there in the unit I was in. So, you know, it never goes away. Racism goes everywhere. So it wasn't whether I was in or out of the military experiencing racism. I recognize racism as being present like it is present today everywhere you go, whether you detect it or not. Your status, if you're a person of color, is a victim of white supremacy, regardless of where you are, or what your politics is, or what your religion is. You come under the heading of the victim of white supremacy, and that's the statement that I just made is either true or false.
Yes, sir.
All right? And I think the evidence shows that it's true. If anybody shows me some evidence where it's false, how I want to see it.
Okay, there you go. Let's go to the phone lines. What line, number one? Okay. Line number one, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead with your question, please.
Is that me?
You're line number one.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Fuller. How are you doing?
Still learning.
Good. All right, now, I'm looking at our relationship with the black girl. Some of black guys with the black girl. And I noticed that we have a relationship with them different from the relationships with other groups of people, such as the so-called Asians, the white people. Now, as far as how we communicate in the position that the female is in with us. Now, the other groups of people who have some clout or strength on this earth, they don't have the same type of relationships that we have with the female. And so, although I know you said that we are equal, the male and female, talking about the black people that is, that we're equal, but as long as we treat them as equal, we're not going to, it seems as though we're not going to make any type of progress until we have a relationship with the females similar to the Asians and the white people, wherein the male is dominant in the relationship. And the ones who give the white people the greatest problems on the earth have those type of relationships. And the ones who don't, such as us, we do have the proper relationship.
So what is your question then? What is your question?
My question is, should we still have the same type of arrangement with the black females being equal?
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, Mr. Fuller, if you understood that.
Okay. I very seldom use the word equality and whatnot because that can mean so many different things to different people. Equal when it comes to what? Okay? And how do you express equality? So I just say use the word justice. Guarantee that no person is mistreated.
Right.
That should be, that's the criteria. We usually know when somebody's being mistreated. So you don't mistreat anybody. So how do you avoid mistreatment? That's all. By getting an understanding with everybody that you interact with. All right? So that nobody is mistreated and the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That's the compensatory concept and definition of justice, the one that I came up with. I mean, people can accept it or reject it. That's up to them. But that's all you have to do. When we say relationships, that's all you have to keep in mind. Wait a minute. Am I mistreating this person? Because you got a list of stops and things. Like, you stop being discourteous. You stop cursing. You ask questions. Like I said, you always solve problems by questions and answers. So rather than getting into shouting matches and whatnot, and certainly no violence, all right, all the black people out here, the black males that strike females, telling them they're going to put them in their place and all like that, and you better not disagree with me, or I will hit you, and all like that. Just stop doing it. That's mistreatment. No, talk to the person. If you can't talk to the person, then you all agree to disagree, meaning get away from each other. This, I'll talk to you some other time if you're going to go back to the person. But the first thing you do is, if you can't get on the same page with each other, break contact. That's the way you handle it. No contact, no conflict. And that's whether it's male, female, or males interacting with each other, females interacting with males, people interacting with people. That's all it is. Anybody, white or non-white.
Yes, because you said
the concept of justice applies to everybody.
Right, because you said
no such thing as justice being off limits.
If a man hits a woman, you said on this program a couple of times, first time, last time.
First time, last time. That female should say, look, and you should get this understanding while everything is all nice and everybody's happy and everybody's laughing and hugging and kissing. And that's the time for the female to let that male know while you're still hugging and kissing. All right, enjoying sex with each other. Everything is just fine. Everything is over the top rosy. All right, during that period, you don't wait. You let that male know. If he ever gets mad enough to strike you physically, the so-called relationship is permanently over. You have to get that understanding before the first argument breaks out, because there's going to be an argument sooner or later.
Yes, yes.
But that argument should never escalate into that male striking the female. That is rock-solid code. And there's no coming back. Once you pass that first lick, that's why the slogan is, the saying is, according to the code, first time, last time. In other words, this will never happen again. Why? Because that female should say, I'm not going to be with you. After that first lick is passed, I'm not going to be with you ever again. Don't ever even talk to me again, as long as you exist on this planet. We are not going to, this whole thing, this arrangement is over. That's the announcement that it's over. You have just announced that it's over, because that's the understanding. That's the contract.
Even if they're married?
Oh, but particularly if they are. I mean, it's not supposed to happen except in one thing, self-defense. All right? Now, if she attacks him, I mean, he is her in self-defense trying to get away from her. All right?
But he still doesn't strike her.
And why do I say, well, what about, some females are stronger than males. So what about that? But I'm talking generally speaking.
Yes, sir.
But if any licks are passed by anybody, that's an announcement that the so-called relationship, which it isn't a relationship in the first place, this is an arrangement.
Right.
That arrangement is dead.
Okay.
It's dead.
We're going to
that should be a rock-solid part. Everybody should understand that. That's one thing about black people. Once that first lick is passed, it ain't going to be no more licks.
Okay, got to leave it there. Thank you, BW. Thank you, BW Gifts, LaShawna King, Eric Williams.